Buonasera, buonasera, benvenuti e benvenute. È un grandissimo piacere avervi qui con noi questa sera, è un grande onore per me poter presentare questo nuovo incontro del nostro public program, bello, la cultura della pace, e dare il benvenuto innanzitutto a tutti voi, che sono momenti sempre molto complicati per trovare il tempo e lo spazio di potersi dedicare al dialogo, e non è scontato appunto prendersi del tempo per partecipare a eventi di questo tipo, ma la partecipazione per noi è importantissima perché è un po' quella che dà il senso al nostro lavoro, quindi di questo io vi ringrazio moltissimo ed è un grande onore per me appunto introdurre innanzitutto la nostra ospite di questa sera, Nadia Murad, attivista yazida sopravvissuta alla prigionia dell'ISIS, che ha ricevuto il Premio Nobel per la pace nel 2018 per il suo lavoro di difesa delle minoranze e di vittime della violenza. Nadia è un simbolo globale, è diventata un simbolo globale di resistenza e resilienza e di speranza anche. La sua storia è raccontata anche nella sua biografia, se poi vorrete approfondire, l'ultima ragazza, che è sold out in realtà in Italia, ma trovate gli ebook e comunque la versione in inglese. E poi però comunque la conoscerete sicuramente meglio attraverso le sue parole questa sera e attraverso le domande che le porrà la nostra moderatrice Greta Privitera, che ringrazio tantissimo appunto di aver accettato il nostro invito a essere qui a moderare l'incontro. Ringrazio poi Fondazione Pesenti, che ci ha permesso di fare questo grandissimo public program e che ci sostiene, e senza l'aiuto insomma non ci dà la possibilità appunto di invitare a Gres ospiti di questo tipo e dai Premi Nobel a leader internazionali impegnati appunto nella diplomazia e appunto in quella che noi abbiamo chiamato la cultura della pace, e per sottolineare l'importanza per noi di riflettere sempre su diplomazie e altri modi possibili per favorire la pace, soprattutto in questo momento storico. Questi appuntamenti in realtà accompagnano e arricchiscono quella che è la nostra mostra in corso, che si intitola The Bello Not So War and Peace, che se non avete ancora visto insomma vi invito a visitare. Sarà aperta fino al 12 di ottobre di quest'anno appunto, e racconta come l'arte insomma aiuti ad affrontare tematiche dei conflitti mettendo gli esseri umani al centro, e lo fa per noi nel più ampio punto di vista possibile. L'abbiamo fatta appunto invitando artisti da varie epoche storiche, diverse geografie, abbiamo opere, linguaggi diversi, insomma si va da opere da un'opera del Rinascimento passando attraverso grandi maestri come Ansel Kiefer, Burri, Scarpitta, ma torna da noi Marina Abramovic, insomma affiancata da giovani emergenti. Insomma speriamo che vi piaccia e che possiate tornare se non l'avete ancora vista. Questo appuntamento si inserisce appunto in un programma più ampio, che è quello del public program. Vi do, prima di cominciare, giusto i prossimi appuntamenti, che non sono ancora pubblici, non è ancora possibile registrarsi, ma ve li anticipo. Sarà per noi poi possibile, appena sarà possibile li comunicheremo tramite i nostri canali social o anche la nostra newsletter. Se non siete iscritti insomma vi consiglio di farlo per restare aggiornati sulle nostre attività. E il primo sarà il 14 di settembre, avremo l'onore di avere 2 premi Nobel, Jodie Williams, attivista americana per i diritti umani, e Kailash Satyarthi, un sostenitore indiano dei diritti dell'infanzia, quindi altri 2 ospiti con noi. Non ultimo poi chiuderemo il public program con questo onore che ho di comunicarvi in anteprima l'appuntamento del 27 settembre che abbiamo fatto in collaborazione con Moltefedi. Avremo l'onore di ospitare Cecilia Sala. Quindi un programma ricchissimo, di cui andiamo molto fieri e orgogliosi, che abbiamo fatto e costruito insieme a Fondazione Pesenti, perché insomma per noi, attraverso l'arte e momenti come questi di riflessione, ci auguriamo di poter ispirare un cambiamento possibile, duraturo, e poter promuovere una visione condivisa di un mondo più pacifico. Ma ora è il momento di cominciare con un breve video per introdurci la nostra ospite di stasera. Così iniziamo la serata. Di nuovo grazie intanto per essere qui con noi.
officials in northern Iraq report that fighters of the Islamic militant group ISIS have carried out a massacre.
In between explosives laid by ISIS, entire sections of the city are destroyed.
We can see the people below, trapped on Sinjar Mountain.
ISIS soldiers would brag about conquering Yazidi women and wiping their religion from the face of the earth.
When I first started telling my story and talking about conflict-related sexual violence, there was not much attention about this issue that is happening in all the wars that are taking place right now as we speak. In 2014, I was preparing for my last year of high school. I witnessed a genocide, the killing of my family members, and the brutality of being held captive as a sex slave. Nadia's Initiative is a non-profit organization I founded to unite governments, grassroots organizers to raise awareness about conflict-related sexual violence, support survivors, and hold perpetrators accountable, and to rebuild post-conflict regions.
I dedicate this award to all the young women like me who were raised in vulnerable communities by strong women.
I wish I had the strength of Nadia. Having every reason to withdraw from the world, you summoned the courage to stand up and say, no, no.
Nadia Murad, a young woman that we at 60 Minutes found in a refugee camp in Iraq. And she found her voice. This young woman that we found in a refugee camp won the Nobel Peace Prize.
She became a global voice for justice and dignity and a sense of common humanity.
Nobel Peace Prize is recognizing efforts to end sexual violence during wartime. It was awarded to Dr. Denis Mukwege and Nadia Murad.
I think it is so important that we find those women who their voices are not heard. We can't bring about change without working with them.
E di nuovo è un onore presentare Nadia Murad e Greta Privitera. Grazie di nuovo per essere state con noi. Pronto? Eccomi.
Buonasera a tutte e a tutti, grazie tantissimo di essere qui. I'm very happy to be here with Nadia Murad, with the Nobel Peace Prize, and in this very difficult time, I guess her testimony makes even more, it's even more important because she represents what war and what regimes and also what terrorism can do in personal life, because as we were saying before, we are talking about war, and usually we speak about it in a geopolitical way, but then war has get into the life of the people that live in the countries that are hit by the conflicts. Thank you, Nadia, for being here. I'll start with asking who were you before 2014? What were your dreams? What was your life? And what changed?
Thank you so much. Thanks to the Pesenti Ets family for having me and for all the amazing work that you do. And to all of you for being here. I am honored to be your guest and grateful, as always, for the opportunity to share my work and my story with you. I was born and raised in Iraq in a small Yazidi village called Kocho. I was the youngest of 11 children, and my mother was a single mother. She raised us all on her own on a small family farm in that village. My mother tried to put all of my siblings in school. She herself never went to school, but it was hard for her, so none of my siblings made it to high school. They all dropped out because they had to join her on the family farm to help her, no matter how young they were. But as the youngest, I was lucky. By the time I was 6 years old, they were doing a little bit better on, economically on the farm. So she decided to keep me in school. And I went to school in the village, and I studied Arabic and as a second language. My own language is Kurmanji. It's a dialogue of Kurdish. And in school, I was just, very excited and proud to be the first one in my family to make it to high school. It was a big achievement. But, in Sinjar and in my village, people that I knew and I grew up with, they only would go up to high school, but no further, because there were no colleges in the region. And for girls and women especially, it was dangerous to go to places like Baghdad and Mosul and study. So after high school, it was, in the family. So that is where I realized that after high school, I was not going to go to college. So I had this wild dream of opening a beauty salon in the village. I loved that idea of beauty and makeup, and I always invited women in the hot summer afternoon to our, house. And for me, it was more of like having a space for women. So that was the project, the dream, job that I wanted to do. But that very summer was supposed to be special. I was preparing for my final year of high school. 2014. Yeah. But with every passing day, we heard news from other religious groups, such as, Christians in Mosul, that ISIS was getting closer. And we saw videos and on the news how they were attacking minorities and different groups. So we asked the security and those who were responsible for our protection if we were in danger. And they said, you have to stay and we will protect you. And then in very early...
You felt in danger?
Yeah, because they were. As a community, we were already marginalized. We've been marginalized for a generation in that country because of our religion. And we feel that ISIS was no different than other previous groups who tried to eradicate us because of our religion. But then, they came that early morning and we were left behind, that the security left and the police left. And in that day, their plan, ISIS had specific plans for each group. For Christians, for example, they give them two options: to pay tax or leave, because they are, people of the book. But for Yazidis, it was not. The options,
exactly.
The options were different.
Why were you, why your people were persecuted?
Yeah, because of our religion and because, we don't have a book and we were not considered people of the book. We were considered, infidels. And in that case, we had, the option was to convert or to die.
What's your religion about?
Yazidism, Yazidis, they've been in Iraq for centuries, and the biggest community in Iraq. We also had Yazidis in Turkey, in Syria, but the ones in Turkey, a lot of them left, and now we have about 50,000 in Armenia. But the biggest community was in Iraq and Sinjar. And, we don't have a book because we have always been targeted and we were afraid to write our religion down. And even our temples, for example, if you go to Sinjar, you don't see any temples like, churches. They're all built inside the mountain, so the enemy couldn't see it. But they still were able to destroy 24 temples. They found them in the mountain. So that's what we got, to convert or to die. and that they, they killed thousands of people.
So they asked you and the other families to convert, or they were going to kill
Yes.
you? And your family decided to convert or not?
No, no one in the Yazidi community accepted that offer. We told them that, we had sheep, we had farms, that we were not, of course, rich, and we never been, for example, small villages were very poor. So we said, take whatever, you want, just let us go, we will leave everything behind. And people refused to convert, and we knew that they were going to kill. Yeah.
It sounds like a very courageous choice.
I mean, you can't just change a whole old religion and the whole people in an hour, right? Because we, our religion and our culture and tradition, it's who we are. Because without that, we're not a community, we're not a group, and that's where people refused. And they started with that, they killed thousands of men and elderly women. So, and during that, 6 of my brothers were killed, who were all married, had children, they were fathers, farmers, and amazing people. And the next day, my mother, who was only 63, with her half-sister, 2 nieces, and 1 nephew, all in one mass grave. And then they started taking young girls and women with children.
How old were you?
I was 21. But I was still lucky, because 21 at that time, and I think back, and I feel like I was lucky in so many ways, because I remember when they separated us from our family, 3 of my nieces were taken with me, and all 3 of them were younger than me. And I feel that that was the first time in my life that I felt responsible of protecting them, because they were young and they didn't know anything. But there were girls that, as young as 9, 11, 12, they were taken into markets and bought and sold. But this is not something that I'm, just that I saw and I'm sharing. If you look and if you search, ISIS used social media, platforms like YouTube, Telegram, and Facebook. They were sending girls' photos to people, recruiting them from Europe. There were thousands of men and women who went from Europe, from all around the world, and joined them because they believed in that ideology. They committed crimes, and they were selling girls in markets in Syria and Iraq. More than 6,000 women and children. Almost everyone, every female, every children in my family were taken. But that's not just the end. Okay, you may have heard that ISIS has been defeated since 2017. But for me, I am here, but my nephew is still missing. My niece is still missing. My sister.
All the nieces you were taking care of?
They were killed, 2 of them. But my other niece, she was 40 days old, and now she's 10 years old in captivity. We don't know what happened to her. And the many mass graves, when my region and my hometown was liberated from ISIS, more than 83 mass graves were discovered all over. So now we have to work on exhuming the mass graves, and then trying to get family members and identification. It's just a process that 10 years, almost 11 years later, many of the challenges and crimes that ISIS committed are still ongoing.
Okay, it's very hard to continue to ask anything else. But so you were taken in 2014, and you stayed a year?
No, I escaped very early. As I said at the beginning, I am lucky in so many ways. So
after how many?
I would say maybe like weeks.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, months, yeah.
Okay. And can you explain how did you escape from them?
Yeah, I think it's the reason that I wrote a book.
Yes.
Because,
Your memoir.
Yeah, because I don't, for me, it is, at the end of the day, I'm a human being, and I cannot repeat that story over and over again every day. And I decided to document, to write that book so that I don't go back for my own well-being.
Okay.
Because at the end of the day, I'm trying to leave so many memories and events that happened behind. Because if I want to carry this message, if I want to continue this work, then I have to also take care of myself to be able to not repeat it over and over again, because it is exhausting at the end of the day. But I was lucky to find a family to help me make it to Kurdistan to safety. And from there, my world was a displacement camp, because my home was destroyed and my family were murdered. And in that camp, with thousands of people, I started to share my story, even though it was risky, it was dangerous, there was so much shame and stigma,
Exactly.
Around rape, and in a country like Iraq, but in
Even
general,
here.
in general, rape is
sexual
stigma,
abuse. Always a taboo.
But I feel that the second I survived, my survival carried with it a responsibility to share with the world what I witnessed. I could not unsee what I saw in captivity. I could not stop thinking about the 9-year-old girls that were bought and sold every single hour of their time in captivity. But it was hard because the cabins and the tents were between me and my neighbor was this thick. So I didn't have even the privacy of sharing my story, and the way that people looked at us, it was a lot. So when one of my first interviews, and it was also dangerous for my loved ones in captivity, because a lot of ISIS members were also our neighbors, who within an hour joined ISIS, neighbors that we shared wedding, holidays, and so much together. And they immediately turned, majority of them, into ISIS. So they knew my
To
family.
survive.
No.
And for ideology?
Yeah. I think that is also something that sometimes we think, people join such ideology to survive. We could have said yes and would convert, but no, it's an ideology where you see people being killed, when you see entire religion being rejected, and it happens. It happened during the Second War, when people turn and neighbors turn into enemies. So that was always in the back of my mind, that these neighbors, they know my family and they know us, and if I speak publicly against them, they're going to harm my loved ones in captivity. I had about 40 members of my family in captivity. So when the 60 Minutes, the US news program came, they were looking for survivors, and they came to me and they said, can you share your story? And of course, the media, the UN, the camps, everything was new to me, because I lived in a very small, remote village, and I was isolated from the outside world. And he told me, he said, in America, millions of people are going to see this. And of course, I thought, if people see it, they will come and rescue my nieces and others. I said, yes, but can I cover my face? That was my first interview. And they said, yes. They were amazing, very respectful, very mindful. So I covered my face and I gave the interview. And I remember walking out of the interview, I realized that, my face and my story, they go together. I can't just share one part. The enemy needs to see that I survived, and I'm sharing what they did to me and others with the world. They needed to see that they could not, eradicate me or destroy me. So that was the only interview where I covered my face, and then I was lucky enough to move to Germany with my sister, and there where I felt more safe and secure to share my story.
You have said many times the only prize that can restore dignity is justice. Why is accountability for war crimes, especially sexual violence, so rare?
Well, it's so rare because it was not a long time ago that rape was recognized as a war crime. And for so long, rape has been seen as a small side effect of war. So it was not a war crime, and they will look at it as something small. Because when there are war and conflicts, we pay attention to the lives that are lost and buildings that are destroyed, as we should. But we often forget about the women and girls and the children who pay a very different but heavy price during these wars, with their bodies, with their mind and their lives. And it was important to advocate and to tell people that every one of us, from survivors of Yazidi communities, but to Congo, Sudan, Ukraine, Kosovo, everywhere in between, we deserve to have our day in court. But we also hear a lot that how can we prevent rape from happening again? We cannot prevent it without justice and accountability, because these people, they are so afraid of seeing a survivor in the courtroom, right? I remember the first case we had in Germany, an Iraqi ISIS member with his German wife committed, crimes of rape and murder, and the survivor, the woman, escaped, and she was able to share her story. And with the German authorities and lawyer, Amal Clooney and others, were able to find the ISIS members, both the man and his wife, and the survivor too, from my village. And that woman who had a child who was 4 years old, and when they were in captivity, the child was crying because she's a child and she was hungry. And that's where the ISIS and his wife were bothered by the girl. And they took her, and summer in Iraq, it's really hot. They took the child and they tied her outside of the window and let the mother watch until she died. And then they took her, her body. But then the mother said when she cried, the wife, the German citizen, came and put the gun in her head and said, if you cry, I'll kill you. But thankfully, she survived. And those people, after ISIS was defeated, he shaved his beard and changed the clothes and came back to Germany. But, it worked out, and we found the survivor and the authorities. And the whole process, it took, more than a year in the courts. And she went to every hearing, and she was in the court every time. But she never showed her face because she wanted to protect herself. And she said when that man who killed the child and made the mother watch, and he was just laughing and everything, she said when they announced the verdict, he passed, like in the room, he passed out, and she said that at that moment, I feel like I got justice, and that what happened to my daughter. So that ISIS member would have never passed out in front of a victim or a survivor in captivity. So that is important. But it was not just for her. That day, it was for me, it was for survivors everywhere.
I wanted to ask you if you ever felt there was justice for your story.
I think I had my day in court in front of the whole world when I gave my testimony at the United Nations, and I walked into that room where there were representatives of some of the most powerful countries in the world, men and women, and I just reminded them that they felt me, they felt thousands of women and girls, and reminded them of their responsibility. But also, in a way that I feel like I have received justice by not letting anyone to shame me and put the blame on me for what had happened to me. So the way that justice means different things for different people and based on their experiences. It's important because justice takes, it's not just about that one moment in the court, it takes so many different forms.
And before getting in the stage, we had the news that in Syria there was an attack, and an ISIS attack, a terrorist attack, and 30 people were killed just tonight. But the feeling is that the international community thinks that ISIS is defeated. How do you answer?
You know, from the very moment that they announced that ISIS was defeated back in 2017, it was just militarily, you know, okay, ISIS it's gone. But what happened to the thousands of people who committed the crimes? People who came from all around the world and joined, and within, like, you know, weeks they were defeated. How? And back then it scared me because it's also an ideology that you cannot defeat in one day and with just weapons, right? But that same coalition has been saying, you know, and in the past months that, oh, ISIS is regrouping, ISIS is coming back, but ISIS never went away. You know, we just said, okay, we liberated land from them, but they never went away because they committed crimes. Less than 10 ISIS members have been held accountable, so the majority is still out there. And in that case, you know, they will come back, of course. And if you look at what they are doing, for example, the way that they are recruiting people now, it's even more dangerous. Because
what do they do?
Because in 2013 and 14, they were recruiting people to go to Iraq and Syria because they were in control of the land. But right now, they are recruiting people and say, for example, let's say in Italy, they would say, you don't have to come because we don't have land, but carry the attack in Italy. So that is even more dangerous, that through the, you know, online, they are recruiting people not to go there, but to carry attacks in where they live. That is dangerous, and that way they can even recruit people faster. Yeah, and in Syria, you know, I am worried. We are on the border in Iraq. The situation even in Iraq, it's not stable, the security. And in Syria, the development were just so fast that we don't know what happened. And it's sad. I heard from you, and I immediately feel that they must be like innocent people who disagree with their ideology because that's who they attack.
And who is looking for all the Yazidis, women and men that nobody knows where they are, and who is looking for them?
We, families, you know, I advocated for years for, you know, the UN and the international community, our own government, to create a special task force and to look for the missing women and children. But we couldn't convince the international community.
There is only private...
I would say a lot of them escaped, they run away. The others, ISIS, when they knew that they were losing, for example, in Syria and Iraq, they will call, let's say, my family and say, pay me $10,000 and I'll send it. And so many families. But you also go to the UN and others and they say, well, I cannot pay ISIS. But of course families will do because they want to rescue their loved ones. So families did that. But today we have 2,600 women and children who are still missing. A lot of the boys were taken into training camps and brainwashed. So we believe that a lot of them were taken into to fight with ISIS, and very, very few calls have been received by families. At my organization on the ground in Sinjar in Iraq, we work with families.
Nadia Initiative.
Yeah, we work with families, and yes, the world left these people behind, but their families, for them, there is no closure without knowing what happened to their loved ones.
So for the Yazidis people, there was recognized a genocide, And in this moment, there's lots of discussion about the word genocide. That is, some people think that is what's happening in Gaza is a genocide. Some other do not consider it's the right word to use in this conflict. Can you tell me how the process of the recognition of genocide of your people, what happened, and what do you went through?
You know, I get to educate myself about genocide after I moved to Germany, because in our language, we don't even use that word. It's called Verman, which is just the eradication, like completely. So I get to learn more and about others. And for me, I will go give my testimony and other survivors at parliaments to people and say, this is what happened, the crimes that we witnessed, and you decide if this is a genocide or not. I never forced them to say. I would say, we bring witnesses, and you go to what ISIS did. So my lawyer, Amal Cloney, and I, we advocated for the creation of a UN team. It's called UNITAD. We passed a resolution. So UNITAD was a special UN team that went to Iraq and documented ISIS crimes against Yazidis and others. So they have thousands of documents, testimonies, and other important information. But many countries where I went to, where their own citizens joined ISIS and committed crimes, I've never, recognized the genocide. Not a single country from the Middle East has recognized the genocide. Not Israel that I went, not Kuwait, not UAE, not Syria, not I've advocated there just as much as I've advocated in the West and other places. So you think back that if we don't recognize what ISIS did as a genocide and all the crimes of rape and murder by neighboring countries, then how are you going to prevent ISIS and like-minded groups from coming back, right? Yes. From coming back and committing the crimes. So yes, in my region, people refuse. My own country has not recognized, but there were other countries like Germany and others, the US, and I think more than 18 countries who have recognized. But it took so much of work. We had to go and give our testimony over and over again, document everything, take evidence to them to be able to convince them to recognize
the genocide. Right now, it's a very confusing and also scary moment in the Middle East, and Iran now and Israel are in a war, and it's one day that also America joined the conflict. And very often we say that Iran's situation is very similar to Iraq, which has some similarities, like the regime and other similarities. You said you were 3 years old how old were you when the first war in Iraq started?
No, I think I was in 3rd grade.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And it's interesting for me that we always speak as a journalist to Iranian people right now, and there's lots of people against the regime, always been against the regime, but right now they're asking to Netanyahu to not bomb their country, even if in some way we think that Netanyahu is working his way to overthrow the regime or helping to overthrow the regime. But the people of Iran are asking not to bomb their cities. What do you think about it? What do you think of what's happening? I wonder if they say the bomb cannot bring democracy. They never bring democracy.
As long as I remember, there was war and conflict in my country, in Iraq, since I was a little child. And I remember very well in 2003 when the US invaded Iraq. And before, days before that, we were told that big, we were promised these big promises that we will have clean water, that we will have hospitals, we will have schools, and these, dreams that for people in Iraq and in small villages, and having clean water was a big thing. So we were told that if, Saddam is taken down, we will have it all. We will have it all.
Like
right?
After the regime, we will live in a free world.
Yes, but I would say that, right after the war and right after the US came, we started to lose what we even had. We left our farms because it was so dangerous to go there. Religious groups were targeted, women were targeted, and all that, promises and all the things that we heard and statements were very far from the truth, right? And the many Iraqi people from all different backgrounds, from different minorities, suffered. A lot of innocent people lost their lives, and the destruction, and then it comes different terrorist groups and ISIS and Al-Qaeda and corruption, and until today, my country is still fighting for its survival, right?
Yeah,
for its survival and the everything that happened. But I want to say that most of the people that lost their lives and their farms were people like my family. They're very poor people because, those in power and those who were, rich, they left. They already had the opportunity, so we paid the highest price. But then after that, for example, after ISIS, it was not just the US. Many countries, including Italy, supported the US to go and invade Iraq, right? And then after that, I will go to this country and say, well, you supported that idea, and now so many people, especially women and widows, are struggling to rebuild their lives. Can we help them? Can we get the support we need to, as communities, as citizens of that country, to rebuild our lives? Or are you ready to bring more refugees, as so many Iraqis are still displaced? And both are no. I don't get the support to help people to go back, but then we don't get to convince people to bring refugees. They send them back, but then you supported that idea. You supported that war, so you should be responsible for supporting people. I am worried, very worried about the situation in Iran. I have, friends, Iranian friends. I received so many emails and letters from Iranian women in the past 5 years reading my book and telling me, everything. My oldest brother was killed in the Iraq-Iran war, so it always was something that in our family we talked about it. But I am worried that, that this is another Iraqi, episode of what happened there. But we must give diplomacy, dialogue, and a chance. We must give peace a chance. I mean, it seems to many of us, to the younger generation, to activists, that diplomacy, it's a joke. You talk about it a lot, and we hope for it. But we must, if it's in Iran or Syria or Yemen or, Russia and Ukraine or anywhere, we must give peace a chance, and we must prioritize innocent people and the safety of women and children together. And I hope that, you, when you think about what is happening there, I hope that when you decide to take sides, you just think of who is going to pay the highest price in Iran. It's in Iraq, it was the innocent poor people like my family. I think there it's going in Syria right now, in Gaza, it's all the innocent people and innocent people of Israel, the people who are living their lives in their houses. So we must think before we take sides. We must not support war because we are supporting.
I've been to Tel Aviv 5 months ago, and I spoke with an Israeli woman that she has this association that is called Family Circle. They meet with families from Palestinian families and Israeli families that lost their child in war. and it's the best thing I ever seen. Like, it's where the peace starts. And she said, this Israeli woman, she's amazing, she told me, please, when you go back, tell the people to not take any side. You have the chance, you are sitting on your couch with your iPhone. Do not take any side, because they try to not take side, but lots of people in the countries do take side, and it's understandable, but not from our couches, where we can help the peace, the speaking of different countries. But I think it's very important, like not taking sides when it's possible to give a possibility to peace or to the right negotiation or diplomacy. Our way to try to convince about our opinion doesn't help the countries that are in war. We have just a few minutes, and then if you have questions, she is here to answer also some questions. I'd like to know what's the idea of your future. What do you want to do in the future? If you ever will open a beauty salon.
that idea, I have not completely given up on a beauty project. You know, I just first want to see a peaceful world. You know, when I think about having my own family, my own children, I have an amazing husband and, you know, very supportive family. I think about all the children in war zones right now and how we should, you know, prioritize peace so that we can have our own families live in peace. I still, when I'm with my nieces and I do their hair and makeup, it's just our way of distracting ourselves from our own trauma and what happened to us. I want to be able to just also share that the work that we have done through Nadia's initiative and hoping that it can become a model for other post-conflict regions, because it is important that we think about what is next, you know, what is after, you know, if you know, in Ukraine and Russia, for example, you need after that to rebuild, to restore dignity and hope and give people justice. And that is something that, unfortunately, we have not had it yet in Iraq, you know, the way that the lack of justice, the people who are still suffering. But I do want to, I want to be able to raise my own children in a more peaceful world. I'm still very connected to my roots. I'm grateful to Germany for giving me a safe place, but Iraq is still my home, Sinjar is still my home, and I go back and try to use my platform and my freedom to help others. So in today's world and what is happening right now as an individual, it's very hard for me to decide on what I want to do, and because I'm just one person. And the situation and the issues in this world are just bigger than one person's dreams.
Thank you so much, Nadia. Se volete fare qualche domanda anche in italiano gliela traduciamo, non abbiate paura, è qui per rispondere, è una grande fortuna. C'è un ragazzo là, non so chi ha il microfono.
In italiano o in inglese? English or Italian?
English would be great.
As you want. I want to ask you, considering the liberation of Sinjar made by PKK, Yebeshe, Yejeshe, many other groups in that period, nowadays PKK is dismantling, as you know. The situation of peace process in Turkey is probably a possibility. What is your feeling and opinion regarding the liberation of Sinjar, the results and the difficulty? I was, when you were in the 10th anniversary last year in Shanghai, I went for one day to attend the ceremony. I take care personally because I believe it's something that we should pursue it also in Italy. Italy doesn't recognize your genocide, actually. So I think it's something we should take seriously. What is your opinion, and what do you think about the liberation of Shengal by PKK, Yebeshe, Yejeshe, nowadays? Thank you so much. Gelex Pass.
Thank you. Well, I think it's so important that we focus first on who lost their lives in Sinjar, why Sinjar was attacked. We must also recognize the many Yazidi people who joined PKK and fought for the land and the liberating Sinjar alongside others. More than 10,000 Yazidis stayed in Sinjar mountain, even though ISIS was so close without weapons or anything. So that is something that we must recognize and acknowledge. But it's also important that, you know, Sinjar was many forces. Like when Sinjar was liberated, I went there. When Kojo was liberated, my village, the next day I was there. I saw so many different forces. You know, I saw Yazidis, saw PKK, I saw, you know, other militias, I saw the Kurds, the Iraqis, everywhere, everyone there, and everyone had the same goal. So it is important and we have said many times, we have thanked them all, but we must also recognize the many Yazidis who were killed alongside PKK, right? And until today, a lot of them, we don't know what happened to them. They went to Syria and never came back. I think that, you know, the decision was really the decision of Kurds and PKKs. When we, like you, I also read and watched as their own leader asked them to collaborate. And if that is going to bring them, you know, give them their rights, or, you know, convincing Turkey and Erdogan to support them, to work together, because for so long it's just been blood and it's just been, you know, killing one another. So if this is the chance, if this is the moment where they can work together, when they can also have the rights, and as Kurds, you know, in Turkey, in Syria, in Iraq, a lot of them have suffered. So we all welcome that, as long as, you know, that they were part of the whole process and had the right and a saying. So that is important.
Se c'è qualcun altro.
Hello, thank you very much. So my question is, given that UNITAD ended its mandate in 2024, although we know there is 2,700 people still missing, also given the international context we are in, okay, it's understandable that this is now, let's say, bottom priority, if it is at all. But at the same time, you know, for example, all that happened in Syria with the yellow mustard gases, you know, like many, again, like she was saying, maybe it's not considered genocide if there is a technical definition, but for sure, conflict-related crimes and abuses, you know, it's a long menu of things. Do you see in your future, given that potentially there are many Nadias in many places, you know, that lived through somewhat similar to you, or who knows, do you see in your future using your personality, you know, you are like a Nobel Prize winner, to, let's say, lobby in order that in order to not, like in the case of UNITAD, the mandate has ended, but the job is not ended. Like you were saying, there is still thousands of people missing. So do you think there is a room for anything of this continuing on, or more of this work continuing on, considering that there is many places where, you know, special commissions and investigation would be needed? Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And UNITAD, it's the UN team that we advocated for. And as I mentioned, they went to Iraq and documented the crimes, and they have so much evidence and testimonies. But suddenly last year, the UN and everyone said that their mandate has ended. But the work was not done. You know, they collected all the evidence, but also the mass graves that they were exhumed, they have been exhumed. The remains have not been identified. In 11 years, only 2 of my brothers have been identified. My mother, my 4 brothers, my nieces, my cousins, they are all in a building in Baghdad. they have not been identified. So that was, the important of the UNITAD will continue to do the work, but also the point of UNITAD was then UNITAD will use all the evidence that they have collected, and they will share them with prosecutors, with countries to hold ISIS accountable. But the Iraqi government decided that no, UNITAD is not going to share this evidence with anybody. And UNITAD, many survivors, Yazidi survivors, didn't want to share their testimonies with the Iraqi government because they didn't protect us, they didn't try to even rescue women and children, so they don't trust the Iraqi legal system. And when UNITAD told them that they can trust UNITAD and this is UN and their testimonies will be safe, then suddenly they feel betrayed because now the Iraqi, is trying to take control of all the evidence and testimonies, and that is scary because all the advocacy that we did, all the work of UNITAD, the point of it was to use this evidence and hold ISIS accountable. But now it seems like the Iraqi, it's not letting that happen. But if you have, for example, Germany, we have cases, Netherlands, we have cases, Sweden, we have cases. We need this evidence to be able to hold these individuals accountable. But we have, so we continue to advocate, I continue to work with the Iraqi government, the international community, because as I said, for many people, like my family, the closure really comes with burying our loved ones and having justice. So that is something we have not, of course, given up on.
C'è qualche altra domanda per Nadia? If there's no other question, there's something you want to share with us that you didn't say? There's something you want to remind us?
No, I just want to thank you all for being here and thank you so much for having me. It's really an honor to be here and for the opportunity to share this story because it's not just my story. If it was my story, you would have never heard it. But it's about the many, many more stories that have not been shared with the world. And I hope that, you will see, as you just said, that, there was an attack in Syria and 20-something people were killed, right? And you hear that from, the Middle East, Ukraine. And I hope that you remember that, behind all the statistics, there are human beings. There are people who are loved, who have families, who have dreams, and they're not just numbers. They're human beings. They're just in different and dangerous parts of the world. So every time you hear the number of people that are being killed, I hope you remember that just like all of us, they are loved and they have families and dreams.
They're like us.
Exactly.
Thank you so much, Nadia. Thank you, really.